You ever been on one of those flights that you have the whole row? Or you have, some of you are saying, I have no idea what that's like. There are moments that you might find yourself on a flight and you're the only one in your row. And sometimes somebody doesn't show up and you're grateful for that. And you think, wow, I'm so lucky or fortunate or blessed or whatever it might be, but it is wonderful. You sit in the middle and you can lean over and see the window. And if you go to the aisle and you can put things next to you, it feels like you're liberated. Like you are the king or the queen of your little world. It's a little sad that your world is so special like that, but it is one of those moments. It happens rarely, and you might be that individual who likes to talk to people around you that you're close to and crammed into your little world. But this is refreshing to be able to be alone into this room in that area. And it is good. Several years ago, I was in eastern Zambia at Mwami Adventist Hospital doing some work there. And I took public transportation. I was not the king of the world. It was public transportation, which means it was a minivan that had bolted 4 benches in the back of this empty minivan. 4. So do the math in your mind. It was bolted into rusty panels in the flooring. I had my own bench, though. I was the king of my world for about 4 minutes. And then people started to occupy this vehicle. I was on my way to Chadiza, a little town, and I was going to pick up some individuals and we're going to bring them back. So 20, 30 minutes on the road. And as I was doing this bus driver, this minivan bus driver, every, 400 yards, he would stop and pick up people. We became packed. And I would say like sardines. And if you have ever opened up a can of sardines, they're organized, lined in with some sort of order. This was not like sardines. Not at all. In fact, I counted 26 individuals in the minivan. Some of you have been into a similar place. We're so close. And when I say we're close, we are all into each other's business. Whatever we're thinking and feeling and what we smell, we are so close to the people next to the other person in front of you or in front of you or behind you. And we were so close, I didn't even know where my limbs were. I know I could see them, but after a while, I couldn't feel anything. We were pressed so tight to each other. And after a while, the sweat, the whole thing, I felt like it was a little gross for a while, but then it's just like you get over it. And I said, soon I will be free one day. But somewhere in that liberated dream that I was in, I heard something fluttering. Somebody was, I think, moving in my abdomen underneath my arm, and it was starting to shudder and shake, and I thought, what's going on? What's maybe my appendix, but my appendix is not right there. Something exploded. I'm looking around and I looked underneath my arm. I saw the beady eyes of a chicken. Just was released a little bit. There's some breathing room underneath my arm. He's saying, who put this guy in front of my life and my world? I used to be the king of the world. Or queen, I don't know. I couldn't see whether this is a hen or a rooster. My dream did end at some point. A chicken, a goat was released to the minivan. And there was all kinds of things with tools and baggage. There was a giant pole that moved over my shoulder because I don't know what the pole was for, but it's some side of a work. But when we got to Chedisa, we all got out. And I looked at this empty minivan, this bus, and I thought, that could have been my world by myself. We gathered and brought it back, but I'm wondering, have you ever in a place where you're just so close, where you're pressing and your body space is compromised? I know some of you are not huggers, right? And I'm okay with the hugging thing, right? I'm kind of a hugger. I can do that. But not everybody is like that. They are not really what we call the touchy-feely people, right? I hope this is not a problem right now for some of you, but this is, in the Gospel of Mark, is a very touchy and feely gospel. In fact, this is the one gospel that is unique than all of the other ones because Jesus is always doing something touchy and feely, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. The deaf and mute man, Jesus puts his fingers into the man's ears, and he touches by his fingers the man's tongue to heal him. Right? What happened to you can speak and say something and it'll happen? Where's that in Mark? No, not in Mark. Peter's mother-in-law, Jesus takes her by her hand from her sickness and actually lifts her up physically. What about the person who are blind? He actually takes a two-touch approach for that story. You can read about it. 2 steps, puts saliva on the eyes. And then it says he puts on the second touch, laying his hands on him. Touchy and feely. What about the man who has leprosy? We'll talk at the end. But leprosy is not a touchy-feel experience. But with leprosy, he says, I am willing, because the question is, would you want to? And Jesus says, I am willing, but he doesn't just say it. He puts his hands on this leper and touches him. My own son, my first son, when I took him to the same area at a leper colony, and I watched my own son put his hands on people who have leprosy. It's a remarkable moment to see how the power of God can transform our hearts and our minds. Our lives. So consider this story here, much like all of the other ones. There's a bit of a segue. We're going to have a segue with Jairus, who is a leader of the synagogue. And most of the synagogue leaders, they're very problematic. They're the source of what's wrong about some of these Sabbath moments in these stories. But this one, he's in trouble. And he asks for some help. And so we'll start with this, but our main story with something along the way. Let's read in this great story as Jesus responds with this request of Jairus. In verse 22, it says, "Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, 'My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she might be healed and live.' So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd followed and pressed around him." We have a couple moments in the Gospel of Mark where people are pretty crowded. It's usually gathering in somebody's house, right? In Mark 2. In verse 25, it says, "And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal underneath the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. And instead, she's not getting any better. She got worse." In my community here, in every medical community that I've been involved with, there's this theme. Even if you can't fix everything, we can make it better. And there's something beautiful about our ministry, the right hand of our ministry and our left. On one side of the arm of our medical ministry that's healing, and the other hand is education, of learning and teaching. These are two arteries that comes out of this church. It goes all the way back to the beginning of time, of being believers. And all of it, we see that she is in a moment where she's almost hopeless. And when she heard about this in verse 27, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, in her mind, she believes this, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. Look at those words, and there is a volume, an encyclopedia. This is a whole series on faith in one phrase. With action, conviction, hope. Is it certain? But I believe enough that I'm going to do this. Notice the symbolic feature here, though. And many people will look at this and they'll say, okay, he's just grabbing on the edge of the coat, the edge of this. I think there's more in this. Symbolically. She, in Luke, in Matthew, this is actually captures that in Matthew, that she reaches out to the hem of his garment. Not just that, it's called the tassels, the phylacteries. These things that are on the edge of your arms and at the bottom of your legs are I don't know, it's created. I don't know a whole lot about making clothes. I just wear them. But this has some history. You go all the way back in the Old Testament, the book of Numbers, in chapter 15, verses 38 and 39, God instructed the Israelites. They said, make tassels on the corners of your garments with a blue cord on each tassel. You will have these tassels to look at, and you will remember that the commands of the Lord. Oh, great, commands again. Whatever you feel about the commandments of the Lord, back then, it was the command of the Lord that liberated them from 430 years of Egypt. So the commandments of God are beautiful, good, and right. Also in Exodus, where do we get this thing, this blue part? Check this out. When Moses and the elders went up and saw who? God. Under his feet were something like a what? A pavement made of sapphire, clear as the sky. This is the throne. The presence of God is there, and it looked like, and ultimately, where do we see this again? Moses is bringing something that's cut out of this rock, this throne, and he comes down and what is it called? The Ten Commandments. But it has this beautiful blue, picture. Even in Ezekiel, you'll see this again. It says on chapter 1, when you actually see the throne of God again, the throne of God is described as what? Like sapphire in appearance. Now, is it a sapphire? I don't know. It just says it's like it. In the book of Revelation, they do the same thing. I see a beast, and it looks like it's got a head of 12 horns, and you have all these things, but you're not actually, you're just describing it as best as you can with language, and sometimes it's like this. Sometimes you see something, you just can't even capture it, but it said it looks like a bear, or it looks like a lion, or it looks like a flower, or it looks like a tree, a big tree, or whatever it is, but you use it to capture the image, but it's just kind of indescribable. And we have this again. So now go back with this notion, because they were to put on their garments reminders of God's law and his will into their lives. It has to have this color in it as well. This blue. Back to Mark in verse 27 and 28. When she heard about this, she came up behind him, touched his cloak, and because she thought, if I just touch this, I will be healed. It's intentional. It's immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was free from her suffering. It happened just as she called it. If I just do this, this will happen. Does that ever happen for you? Do you call it? I just believe this. This is going to happen. At one moment here, at once, Jesus, in verse 30, says, Jesus realized the power had gone out of him. And he turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my clothes? Well, this is a problem. That this great rabbi who's supposed to be so smart, so spiritual, he's being touched by everyone, and now he has a moment. You see people crowding in verse 31. You see people crowding against you, like we're in a minivan. We're touching each other. Everybody is in your business. And yet you can ask, who touched me? It's a good question. Even though the question was not answered, people commented. They said, doesn't make sense, but the whole time, Jesus is not derailed by everybody's question and how uncommon this might be. Jesus is still looking for the one person who touched not just Jesus, him, his tassel, not just Jesus, as everybody was, but somebody grabbed on to the heart of God in that moment. In faith, it goes directly into heaven, to the throne, where there's authority of God's truth and grace can bring healing and power into a person's life. He grabs that part of that artery, that nerve. And he said in verse 32, Jesus kept looking around to see who had done this. And then the woman, knowing what happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. Now, we had this conversation last week. One of our saints here had that same question. Fear? Trembling with fear? I thought love casts out all fear. But this is a problem, isn't it? Is it the fear of a person who's terrified about a person? Do you look at this situation? We'll get to that. But notice this. We'll finish this story and we'll look at a couple remarks. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. And go in peace and be freed from your suffering." So for me, in many of these stories, you read the story, you make a couple comments, but at the end there are some, I call them remarks, reflections that allow us to be marked by this story, if we will. Okay? Here's one of my remarks. Faith in this story. It's a reach, isn't it? Every time. Faith is a reach, and faith doesn't wait for permission. It just reaches. The woman acted boldly and reaching out in faith, despite of the sickness, the shame, the cultural exclusion. She didn't ask Jesus directly. She believed quietly and acted publicly. True faith takes the risk of reaching even when it feels unworthy and unnecessary. Like most of the time it's unnoticed as well. I've seen so many people who make these steps quietly, but they are very real. But no matter what, God is going to ask you to make a reach. The very salient part of our faith will be a moment where you have to reach. Number two, a touch of faith draws out of a flood of power. I love this concept here. I see it in some of the most amazing things in the Bible. The book of Romans is all about this theology and this great stuff. But if there's one thing in the book of Romans, we'll probably talk it in the fall, but that grace is greater than any failure and brokenness and sin in a person's life. You think sin brings death, grace brings what? Abundantly, even more. It's greater, it says. So in all of that, you see that beautiful truth. A touch of faith draws out of a flood of power. Comes right out of it. It's like there's very divine in everything that's human in our lives. And to be able to touch that, it's going to require something. You have to move into things. But there is something divine in this very human world that we have. And sometimes in the lives of people as well that might be very human, but there is something inside. Remember last week we talked about a demoniac. What looked like nothing was good in this person, evil. And yet Jesus found the divine moment inside, that open door, that fertile ground, that platform or that foothold that he could put all of heaven's power into flourish into something that's glory. Same thing again. And also, the third remark is one act of faith becomes a spark for many. This action of touching the hem of the garment, it's the first time, but this became the thing to do. It's almost like it went on Instagram or something like that. This person, this individual developed a method of healing. Look what happens later in Mark chapter 6, verse 56. Throughout the whole region, they carried sick people on the street, right? They're gathering on the countryside. They put people in the marketplaces. And what are they doing? To just only do what? She's a teacher of others. See, this faith is very contagious, isn't it? And one story of healing opens the door for others, and even a community of hope. This is why we grieve with hope. We celebrate with hope. We serve with hope. We do all of it out of this because it flourishes into other things that we can't even imagine. One more little symbolic twist to this. In Leviticus 15, the rule is that if you have this condition, if you are bleeding, if you're a woman and you're bleeding, you are not allowed to touch people. That's a rule. However, in this story, she's not supposed to touch, especially a rabbi, right? It's the law. Notice this. She broke a ceremonial rule, didn't she? She broke the rules. Uh-oh. But she broke a ceremonial rule, reaching for a deeper truth, wasn't she? She touched the symbol of obedience to the law by reaching out to that one place to access the mercy seat, the very heart of the lawgiver. He went right into the heart of the real principle and the very person behind that precept. Some flinch at the word law as of some sort of a cold command or some cosmic killjoy. But what if God's law, it's not an offense. It's not something to keep us out. But this window, because somebody has to define what is good, right, and true, right? And that's what it is. And sometimes it's something that's not like this. And sometimes it's like this. But no matter what, it's always clarifying and trying to capture the heart and the character of God. She breaks the rules. Didn't David break the rules by grabbing some bread? A little carbo loading in the temple. Grabbing this because it was there and they needed it. To miss this opportunity to just it's actually when you You get the point, but you miss the whole person behind it. So it's the opposite of grace. The law is not the opposite of grace. It's not an enemy of grace. It's the shape of grace when it takes a walk and serves and grabs a person's life. This is real grace in action. That's what the law is. The law is beautiful, not because we've mastered it, because it reveals a God who is good, holy, and true. And this is our standard. This is our Father. This is our standard in heaven. This is what we're called to, in the image of that person. So like the blue, deep blue color of a sapphire, it shines. It doesn't shape, doesn't make us, turns us away, compels us. So this law doesn't crush us, it clarifies us. It tells us what is right and good. And out of this story, you can actually see the reaction of the lawgiver, this keeper of it and the owner of it and the purveyor of it. He comes up, and instead of punishment, she receives what? Healing. And instead of someone rebuking her for her law breaking, she is publicly affirmed. In one of the 10 people, Jesus will say, this is what I'm talking about. That is what you get in that moment. He calls her daughter, your faith has made you well. There's a story of Dr. Paul Brand. He's touching the untouchables in India. It was the person in the mid-1900s we learned more about leprosy. Dr. Paul Brand revolutionized the whole treatment of leprosy in India. Many doctors back then would avoid touching the patients. They would use tongs and gloves. And even the religious institutions followed the rigid sanitation protocols, treating those patients who are cursed or dangerous. But Brand actually discovered that the real issue wasn't the infection, because they found out that the infection could be treated by antibiotics and things like that, but it was the real danger and the issue was the loss of pain that led to injury and disfiguration. So he did the unthinkable. He actually reached. He took a reach. He started to touch them. Physically and emotionally, he touched them. He sat with them and touched their wounds and showed them that they still have value, that they're not evil. You're not lost. He challenged both medical and religious taboos by touching what everybody else was feared to do. Yeah, he broke the rules, but he broke the past of its limitations to reveal something much greater. Healing, to restore the whole person. Now, I'm just looking at stories like this. Today, just a simple question. In your condition? Now, we all have a condition, and if you don't, you have an even greater condition. So, what condition is calling you to reach out to the hand of your Savior, Jesus Christ? Because it's a reach. You can ask for it. But go ahead and touch that tassel. But just don't grab the tassel. Go to the heart. Go to the center of that, because his desire The hope that you want is his desire that you can find healing and wholeness and restoration. So it's just a reach. You can do it in a lot of different ways. This week I'm going to touch the door that I walk into my house every time. Like long ago, they put blood on their doorpost. I'm just going to touch it when I go in to physically say, Lord, save this house. Find some way to touch the hem of God's garment as we sing.